Carl Newman, also known as the Ballet Bat, the man behind the mask. Carl starred as the unsung hero as Michael Keaton's movement double in the iconic 1989 Batman movie. Now he brings his story to life, from superhero to dancing with some of the world's greatest names, such as Arlene Phillips and Bruno Tonioli. For any movie lovers out there, today's conversation is a must-watch. Some of the incredible stories and anecdotes that Carl has for us today are such incredible insights into the makings of one of the greatest superhero movies of all time. As I say, if you're a movie fan of any sort, superhero movie fan, or just want to know the ins and outs of working on a set with some of the biggest actors in the world of cinema, then you will thoroughly enjoy this conversation. And if you do, make sure that you leave that comment, subscribe, like, and all that jazz so we can continue to bring you the best possible guests. I want to really sort of just start a conversation right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And what was the start of your career like? What did you ultimately want to do when you were younger, going into, the big wide world out there? What was young Carl like?
Well, it's quite a fascinating story because I wasn't one of these guys that had a laser focus thinking, right, I want to do, I want to be a drummer or I want to be a dancer or whatever. I had several things that I was very interested in, which was one of them being a professional drummer, um, one actually being a dancer as well, and one being a chef, believe it or not, because I loved a variety of things. I think variety is the spice of life, as they say. And I actually did an art and jewelry combined course at school, and I started off actually making jewelry with a renowned designer
Mm,
with diamonds, and I was an apprentice goldsmith.
wow.
But fortunately, that didn't work out. I was dancing and I was a fitness freak, a fitness junkie as well. And I was doing dance several times a week. And so I think ultimately it pushed me towards, pursuing that direction.
What got you into dance to begin with?
A love of, the greats. So, I was fortunate that my late parents brought me up with, they were from the 50s generation, but they were very much into, Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, all those greats. And I just loved all that. And then Michael Jackson
Mhm.
was a big influence, the Jacksons. And then I saw a lot of the ballet dancers, like Narayev, Wayne Sleep that we had in this country, and Anthony Dow. But also then I went on to Mikhail Baryshnikov, who I think was the greatest ever ballet dancer. And, it was very different for my generation because, sadly, dance was not given the kudos and respect it should have had. And I mean, I've done karate, I've done so many different sports, but when you do ballet, it's one of the most physical things you'll ever do. So I sort of pushed through all the stigma and sort of, prejudice, if you like. And yeah, I just loved it. I absolutely loved doing it. And then one thing led on to another where I was actually playing drums for a dancing school,
Mhm.
and they saw me dancing socially and they said, "Oh, you should do more." Because, at that time I was bitting and bobbing. But I met a guy who consequently sort of gave me a great recommendation. He said, "Look, Carl, why don't you go to where I go? We've got some amazing teachers." It was called the Leicestershire County School of Dance, and it was very much ahead of its time. You had a one teacher who was doing classical that was former Royal Ballet, and then you had a guy who was doing contemporary ballet who was former Rambert. So you had such great sort of backup there with the skills of these teachers. So I started doing that, and I just loved it. I mean, there was a great community spirit. There was definitely more girls doing it than guys, but we had great camaraderie. And we happened to perform at some of the great theatres here in Leicestershire. And we did we did the very first National Youth Festival of Dance, which was again one of its kind. So yeah, ultimately these things then gave me that ambition. And I thought, you know what, I can't hang around any longer. I need to do this. And my
Yeah.
friends were going off and auditioning for full-time colleges and things in London. So I finally got my act together and was accepted at the prestigious Lane Theatre Arts in Epsom in Surrey.
So, was there any point in this time where either you'd thought about films or either you thought that there would be a world where you could combine dance and film together?
Yeah, I think we all have these dreamlike moments. I was very enamored with the leading men and the women, but the leading men, it was very much that sort of Hollywood, wonderful image. They always look so handsome and I'd done quite a bit of modeling as well, and I just loved that. I loved the glamour, and I was just, very ambitious to I love to be in front of the camera, and I thought, you know what, if I can get into a film or if I can do something like that, then that's absolutely brilliant, and I'd had little sort of forays into stardom. When I was playing the drums, my teacher said to me, do you like punk? And I said, yeah, it's all right. And he said, well, I could get you, you could be the drummer with the Sex Pistols. This is the honest truth. And I said, oh, I'm not sure. I was more into the jazz and the soul and the funk and the R&B and that kind of stuff. But, I had these little brushes with stardom. And, you need to meet the right people along the way.
Yeah.
But I did a student film helping a friend out. She was at film college, and she wanted me to be the actor in that. And yeah, there was these little forays into that. So I think, yeah, ultimately that was the ambition to get further.
So take us on the journey then of when and how you first heard about Batman, of course, and how that came about.
Well, I was very fortunate. I was with a number of dance agencies. You can do that as a dancer, whereas with an actor you have sole representation. But I was going up for various auditions and castings for really great jobs, and I was kind of familiar to what was required. But then I got this call from dancers who are very much the most established agency in London. And they said to me, look, Carl, they're doing the new Batman movie at Pinewood Studios. They've got Michael Keaton, who is not the usual choice for a superhero film, but they're looking for someone like yourself that can bring in this athleticism and this grace, flair, etc. So I thought, fantastic. So that was my initial introduction to it. And I think I got a slightly different angle of it when I went to meet the first assistant director, because I'd realized that Michael Keaton had done comedy and he'd done Beetlejuice. So I was going in at a slightly unusual angle. But anyway, it didn't matter. The guy said, look, this is the way it's going. This is what we're looking for. And then, as with these things, you don't always hear straight the way. They have to go back and report, etc. And then I heard some weeks later from I think the second assistant director, and he said, "Look, Carl, we need you to come in now. We need you to try the suit on and go from there." So that was just, I think what it is, Finn, for me is that, I was this very physical guy that loved all of those things. And if you like, because of previous disappointments where I just got pipped to the post
Mm.
on another big job, This was kind of like my destiny. I really felt that this was perfect for me because I was doing a lot of athletics as well as dance and all the other things as well. So if you like, I think the stars were aligned. It was mapped out almost for me to go and be the one, the chosen one, because of my attributes, my skill set. And I know when I went in to Pinewood the second time, met the wardrobe team, and consequently met Tim Burton, it was just everything I could have wished for because I could be very theatrical in the cape. And I wasn't afraid of just letting myself go and running and jumping and hurling myself around to make an impact. And ultimately Tim wanted me, so that was just amazing.
Take us into that because we'd spoken about this before today about using Batman as this example of there are films and superhero films are quite unique in the way that they maintain a legacy and they maintain such an incredibly devout loyal fan base, and there'll be people that, and it can go back to comic book days and whatever, and then the way that people build up these characters, immortalize these characters, and it's something that these films always get remade time after time with the same interest, with the same love. Everyone knows these iconic characters. Take us into that moment where you find yourself for the first time suited up as Batman.
Well, it's surreal, isn't it? Because I'm of a generation, even though I was only, I think, four when the Adam West, Burt Ward Batman came out. And we know what that iteration was. It was very camp. It was very kitsch. It was of its time. It was humorous, and I think it's nice not to be harsh on that because that fitted that era, didn't it? In the 60s. But for me, when I got to try the ultimate suit on, and bearing in mind I'd done a lot of commercials, other film work, a lot of television, so I was used to going to these top costumiers, like Berman's and Nathan's and Angels in London. And, I loved all that as well, because I explained previously, I loved all the glamour of Hollywood, the old films, whether they be also the British ones as well. But you can imagine this was the first dark and serious Batman, wasn't it? That Michael Uslan and Bernard Melnick managed to get the rights for. And that suit when I first saw it, it was just out of this world. I mean, the design, it was so organic. And then when you put the whole thing on, it was quite a ritual to get that on as well. But when you put that on, it just transformed you. You felt like a superhero anyway, because it was very robust. It looked very masculine and powerful and strong. And so, yeah, I really felt, and all along, I really felt like Batman the whole time, that just made me, the true superhero. And I was very fortunate that the publicity department asked me to do a lot of the shoots as well to showcase how the suit looks and how Batman should hold and hold himself and project. So yeah, it was the ultimate costume and just mind blowing.
So from the costume into the experience, what was the filming like? What did it look like? How did it take place? And how would it sort of work itself out, I guess, in terms of the changeovers between who was in the costume and how everything sort of meshed together on the ground?
Yeah, well, I think with this filming, and we know filming is a slow process. It's laborious only in the sense of the fact that it's got to be perfect, hasn't it? With the lighting, with costume, with any kind of special effects or whatever. I'd kind of got that in my head anyway, and from previous things that I know it's that slow process. But there was no real pattern sometimes. You think there would be, with the storyboards and the way sequences at work. But sometimes things can also be quite, you know, sort of off the moment, spontaneous, where, oh, Carl, we need you now. So you have to be one of these kind of people, these performers that's very patient. You can conserve your energy, and then when you need to bring your A game, you do. You kind of explode on set, and you're right in the moment. So, yeah, I think they were also finding their feet a little bit anyway.
Yeah.
And there's the various things where, you have a stunt coordinator there, so he's keeping an eye on things as well. And he probably wants his guy in certain things as well. So you're dovetailing, you're fitting in to all of that. But I was the kind of person that was very studious. I used to watch everything all the time. If there was a free moment for me and I could go and watch or see a scene unfold, I would do. And then, as I say, you got straight back into the zone when you put the costume on and you were right there then, and I was very conscious of, being Batman and because with dancers, it's acting anyway. The movement is you're being directed. So an actor needs to know how to move and what's going on in that scene. So I was conscious of, like in the bell tower, for instance, I was conscious that, my girlfriend Vicky Vale has been kidnapped, and she's in danger with the goons, and I need to be very alert to what's happening there. So yeah, I mean it's for me, it's still electric because I'm just seeing all those amazing sets and the way they light these things. And then, as I say, the Batwing crash, for instance, it was kind of cut between me and Michael a lot of that when he goes into the cathedral as well. But it's fascinating when you see the guys setting up the crash and the kind of explosion and all these fire things happening. And you're there like a big kid, thinking, wow, you've got the best of the special effects people there that have worked on Superman, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, you name it, these great legacy of films at Pinewood. So you're electrified watching them and you're watching, then there's a bit of makeup going on, Michael or myself, with the wounds of the crash and everything else. And it's fascinating. So yeah, it was just amazing.
And you touch on Michael, obviously. There, it's a, and even from when you're talking about Tim Burton at the beginning, so it's equally such a famous film because of the big names in it, and you've got Michael as Batman, you've got Jack Nicholson, of course, in it as well. Not only what was it like to be sort of in the world of these people, and especially talking about, you're saying there the interchange between you and Michael Keaton is you're working so closely together because you're playing the same character, obviously. So what
That's it. Yeah.
and what equally was like the relationship like with those guys? How did you find them as people and also as professionals as well?
Well, I was very lucky because I think where I sort of directed myself was you know, we can get very sort of precious about these things, where some people say, "Oh, well, I had a driver, and I had my Winnebago, my trailer or whatever." Yeah, I had some of that, but a lot of the time I actually wanted to be with the others, so I formed amazing friendships with the wardrobe people. And one of the guys that would be getting me ready was a guy that lived very near to me in London. So I would go in with him. And so we had all that. But the point I'm making is that because I was around the wardrobe even more and really befriended all of them, that meant that when Michael would be around or whatever, I would be around them a lot cl more closely.
Mm.
And I did always speak to Michael an awful lot, because he was the main one. Obviously, I was doing the same character, but I found them all really lovely and very friendly. I mean, Kim didn't originally know what I was doing. Sometimes with the way these things map out, they you get sort of pushed under the radar a bit, and you're doing these things, and she might not realize. But then when she knew what I was all about, she was just so lovely. Jack was amazing again. I took my time with him because I'm not someone who forces myself onto others. I wait, to break the ice, wait for the right moment. And also you respect their privacy, don't you? Their space.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of that, but Jack took me under his wing and was very complimentary and encouraged me when I did the scene with him in when I was stalking him in the bell tower, and when I just saw him generally anyway, which was an awful lot. Tim was amazing, just so down to earth, so again supportive, helpful, very appreciative as well of what I was doing. My sad thing was just I wish I could have met people like Jack Palance. He was an actor that was from my parents' generation who was renowned as an actor, wasn't he? And amazing talent. It's just how things are sometimes, where you're in one part of the set and they're doing their part, whatever, on another part. But yeah, that whole kind of experience was very supportive, friendly. Everybody got on, everybody knew that we were on to something. We never knew quite that it would be so incredibly massive and seminal, in that way, but we knew that the ingredients were there. But I think for someone like myself as well, where Jack Nicholson was a family favorite,
Mm.
and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which we all know was just a staggering performance, as are many of his. But it's a dream, isn't it, to be amongst someone like him, but not just. I was around him very closely, so there was those interactions where his humor was so dry and funny, and it's just like one big fun experience, really.
And am I right in saying that I was sort of looking ahead before we started talking that he was the one that coined the nickname that sort of put gone on beyond the film that is that you sort of still going by today?
Yes, yes, the ballet bats
Yeah.
handle that I've got. Yeah, it all stemmed from, I think, he had gone to see The Phantom of the Opera. And so he was very intrigued with all that. And I think he had some influence in that sort of bell tower sequence anyway. But when he knew about my background and everything else, and these things that I'd done also in the film, that he coined that phrase, and then Michael started using it as well. And I'm sort of enamored with that tag because it is very, very unique. And I think really we, we miss it from subsequent films, where I think it's one of the key facets of that superhero, the bat. I mean, he's going to do the martial arts and things like that. But that lovely sort of flying and the way he uses cape and that athleticism and finesse,
Mm.
we seem to have gone away from that now, more into this brute force kind of way of beating all the thugs all the time. But I just think, it hit the right vein, and because Tim is as he is, with his sort of love of all the different things as well. Like he was a big fan of Hammer House and Ray Harryhausen, and he gave it all these different facets, didn't he? This depth. Whereas sometimes, the CGI now can take over, which I think is a crying shame.
Mm. I think you put that really, really nicely. And the other thing that is really fascinating to listen to when you talk about it is that fact of it's something that both the tagline and the impact of being in the film has lasted this long for you, but equally, it's got to feel a bit weird to think that it is, we're talking like 30 odd years go past and the legacy is still what it is, and we'll get to it in a minute in terms of the conventions and other stuff that are still massive successes for you and it must be a bit weird to, but you did touch on, when you're in the moment, you don't think about what it could go on to be. But I doubt you can even like sort of conceptualize the fact in that moment that you could still be, sat here talking about it 30 odd years later.
No, I mean, who would have realized, and I think we may have spoken about this before, where I said to you that, this is this kind of like a double-edged sword in a way that, when I did this film, and it was absolutely colossal, wasn't it, in terms of the Batmania that went around the States. I mean, they'd never experienced anything like that before, and certainly in the UK as well. And I remember when we'd pretty much wrapped the film, and I used to speak to a lot of the people, and they'd say, "Well, look, I think we'll be back here very soon for the sequel because they've spent so much money on building Gotham City." And so it's like you never rock the boat, not that I change how I am, but I always got on with everyone. You're not difficult to work with.
Mm,
And I really thought, you know what, I could see this sort of happening, the sequel, the following year, because that's what can happen from history. But I was going up meeting people, and I was meeting some very big casting directors in London. And people perhaps can't believe this, but when they'd say, "Well, what have you been working on?" And I'd say, "Well, I've just been working on Batman." And it was almost like, this disbelief.
mm,
So it was really, really weird because ordinarily, people would be, "Wow, that's incredible, tell me about it." And I was just thinking, I just can't quite understand this. And then I was going from casting to casting, and then I met Danny Cannon, who was doing Judge Dredd, and I was close there, and then I was close with Eyes Wide Shut. I know these are some years, certainly Eyes Wide Shut, years later, but there was these weird things, and I was carrying on doing my stuff as you do. But then you think, why didn't they make more of me for the promotion of the film? Because in America, they did these OnStar commercials with an actor where he'd got the 89 suit. That was for an insurance thing. But, I was thinking, why? You can look back now and you think, why doesn't that happen? But as I say, you merrily go along with your career, and I got some disappointments as well. I could have worked with Diana Ross. I could have done the Royal Variety Show. I could have worked with Pearl Bailey. She's an American sort of superstar in the musical scene. But, these things clashed with the filming, or they
yeah.
clashed with something else. So there's all this going on. But just getting back to the main point of the film, yeah, I just kind of marched on, and then all of a sudden, I start seeing things on social media with my photographs,
Mm,
and I'm thinking, wow, maybe I need to do more again. So I started getting into it, and then there was a guy from the Wiki fandom who
mm.
said, "Carl, you're the guy we've been waiting for. You're the missing link." And I'm thinking, well, why has this not happened? But anyway, consequently, I got on the Bat Force radio station, which is a massive one in America. And that just pushed me right out there. And then all of a sudden, these costume makers and artists and designers and fans were like reaching out to me saying, "Wow, we always thought it was Keaton, that did those iconic scenes and movements, but we find out it's you, and it's you in these photographs as well." And it's like it just blows up again.
What does that feel like?
It feels incredible because I'm not a bittersweet kind of, sour grapes kind of thing. Um, but you think sometimes I should have I should have been given more. I should have got more because we look at the Dave Prowse scenario, who, funny enough, has been to Moyses Hall, which I'm going into next week. And there's parallels there in the sense that Dave was a bodybuilder. He trained Christopher Reeve. He filmed Superman at Pinewood. you know, I could have trained Michael Keaton. They could have asked me to work with him more because I'd worked with some of the best choreographers and dance teachers in the business. I was an absolute fitness nut. As I say, I did karate, I did athletics. So I'd got a whole realm of books that I used to read and study and practice. So the depth was there to teach someone like Michael. And then of course Dave did incredibly well on the circuit. But for me, I don't know what happened. I didn't get any sort of opening until sort of in these last 2 years where I've pushed more and sort of reminded people more, or there's been the potentials and then they've fallen at the last hurdle. But you know, all I just feel is it's something that I could have had previously, and now it's adding to my legacy, if you like, to say, you know what, Carl, you're the unsung hero, really,
Mm.
because you were the one that, Tim mentioned to me about working in the States, and then, I don't know what happened with the sequel, but he was keen. He praised me an awful lot at the rap party. And so I feel that these things are, just like a kind of a nice payback to say, you know what, Carl, a lot of people grew up at different ages, but maybe in their childhood, that movie stands up there as being the main influence for them.
Yeah,
And you are a huge part of that. And it's nice that you're getting this recognition now, um, because I'm a perfectionist. I won't hesitate to not say that, but I'm the kind of person that thinks, you know what, I did, as you do, you put your heart and soul in these things.
mm.
I put my body on the line. I could have killed myself in one of the sequences because there was no
Wow.
safety measures. That's the kind of, I know that sounds a bit insane, but when someone's got you on the top of a building and wants you to do a sequence and you think, well, I can do this. I know I can. I'll just work it out in my head and my
Yeah,
movement, where the safe distance is, etc. Um, yeah, you just put all that in and you've made a difference in people's lives and you think, well, they won't begrudge you having a show somewhere.
yeah.
And I think for me, I want to just say thank you to the fans and talk to the fans, meet them.
Yeah, I think you've put that so nicely and so eloquently as well. And it is, as you said, a deserved way of seeing things now and being able to experience all of that, both from Batman and other projects that you talk about through films. What would you say your movie work experiences have been like when you
Yeah,
reflect back?
yeah, well, that is the ultimate, that is the ultimate because sometimes you can be very restricted in what you're doing, and that's understandable. If you're there for a specific thing, like I work with Robert Lindsay on a film called Strike It Rich,
Yeah,
and that was at I'm sure that was Pinewood again. Yeah, and I was doing a tango there with a girl, and I think there was just a couple of couples that were doing that. And so that you'll have a choreographer there, and he's working out, how long you've got to do this tango and where you're moving around. And I did a similar thing in a film called White Mischief, where I was doing foxtrot and waltzing, ballroom kind of stuff with a number of other couples for sequences in that. So, yeah, they are very specific because you're choreographed. You're working with the director. And then I've done TV sort of films, again. But I think with the Batman, what was lovely was that I could propose ideas to Tim, so he might say, well, look, Carl, can you do this? But then I could um, put my full penneth in, and say, well, look, this is what I'm thinking. I think this would work. And he might just let you sort of run with it, because he trusted you with the way you moved and everything else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I've done an awful lot of those kind of things where and that's the great thing with dancers, is that you've got that diversity to be able to, I worked with the Pet Shop Boys, but I didn't actually meet them. But I did a segment for a film that they did, which was called It Could Happen Here. And the segment we did was Rent. And it was Arlene Phillips, one of the best choreographers in the country and in the world, in actual fact. And I did some robotics in that sequence. So again, you're bringing these different things to that collective,
Mm.
and that's what makes it so interesting. So that's been my experience, is that lovely diversity where I've not been kind of constrained, so to speak, but there's been various dance styles or different things that I've been able to dip into.
Yeah, and I think just actually before we look at sort of the stuff that you're doing now, and what's coming up, you talk about Moises Hall and stuff. I think it's important to raise that. You talk about sort of maybe the credit that you deserve for stuff and what you've worked on, but you even touch on it there with Arlene Phillips. Like you've equally worked with the biggest names in the dance world as well as the film world as well.
Yeah, I feel very, very lucky, Finn, with that because, you know, these are people that you're just so, you know, blown away by, inspired by. I mean, the sort of the hot gossip of the day and all these great things. I mean, Arlene was really out there, wasn't she? With because that was a very risque kind of dance troupe that she brought to the fore with Kenny Everett. And I worked with a couple of the ladies from and the guys as well from Hot Gossip. I mean, I remember assisting one of the dancers, Maddie Loftin, who went on to do The Meaning of Life, the Monty Python film. We worked together on a project. But yeah, these were people that have got such a rich kind of history in dance. Charles Orgins, from America. I mean, he was a colossal giant of a choreographer that taught at Pineapple and things. And Misha Bagazy, he was a former ballet dancer turned actor, writer, and in a company of wolves. And a lot of those really great people that I was fortunate. I mean, and sometimes I got in with great people, and then one guy, he was brilliant, Clive Hicks Jenkins. He's a brilliant artist, and he gave up the dance, the choreography, and moved into art and illustration. But I remember auditioning for him, and we did a great job in Vienna. And then few years later, he retired, and I was like, oh no, because he was phenomenal choreographer, so different, and used a lot of the ballet contemporary, which is the strength. I mean, that's why Gene Kelly was so good because it gives you the core of dance if you're good at ballet and stuff. You've had ballet training, but yeah, I'm very, very fortunate to work with some of these people.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear all the stories that you've got to tell. It really is, and I do want to be able to finish by just giving you that floor space to talk about, what you're doing at the moment, like what's coming up. As I said, we've touched on Moises Hall a couple of times, and I know that today's a busy day for you in terms of having this conversation and also hopping onto a podcast later on today. So, just talk to us about sort of the world that you find in yourself in now.
Well, it's incredibly enriching because I started to make really good progress last year with conventions and loved all that. And I think this is just building now. 2026 is building into such an exciting year for me that, yeah, Moises Hall is such a standout moment for me because to be in that Gothic setting, the Undercroft, which is like 12th century, 11th, 12th century, just amazing. And then a following day there. But then coming up, I'm going to be all over the place. I'm going to be in Kent later in the year. I'm going to be in Wetherby in Yorkshire. I'm going to be in Darlington. I've been rebooked for one again in Birkenhead and Peterborough Cathedral. There's another one in Oxfordshire, Abingdon. I'm waiting to hear about some potential ones in America, which I'm dying to break into America because, Batman is massive there. I don't know why it's not happened yet, but it's getting that commitment from them to sort of bring me over, and I think it's getting ever closer to
Mm.
happen. But uh, I contributed to a book with an amazing journalist, DC. She's talking about the DC and the universe, the years of it, and of course we spoke about Batman. So I'm hoping that will come out. But there's kind of things just happening, all the time. And I'd love to do more. I'd love to get more into the filming again because, I still feel I've got it in me. And I think when I saw The Flash and to see Michael again, it was incredibly exciting. And I thought, well, he's 73, I think now.
Mm.
Um, I'm a good 10 years, younger than that. Why can't I help out again? I'm certainly up for it. I'm keeping in good shape. I'm doing a lot of fitness and stuff. But it's weird, isn't it? When you've come out of it for a while, it's hard then to break back in. But I'd love to do more performing again for sure.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like not just this year, but like moving forward in general, it's going to be an exciting time, and look forward to seeing everything that goes down, and staying in touch. But it's been so nice to be able to sit and talk to you and hear the brilliant stories that you've got, Carl. So just thank you
Oh,
so
thank
much.
you. And to you as well. Thank you so much for arranging this. It's been a joy. It really has.
It's been brilliant. Thank you so much, Carl.
My pleasure, Finn. Take care.
A big thank you to Carl Newman, the Ballet Bat, for giving us some brilliant stories, some brilliant insights, and some great conversation about the filming of the 1989 hit Batman movie starring Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, and so many other huge names, which Carl featured in the iconic Batman suit for most of those huge scenes in the movie. If you did enjoy the episode and you've made it this far, as I say, make sure you've hit that subscribe button, the like, left us a nice comment, and all of that good stuff, because in 10 days' time, our next guest is going to be a very, very special one. So you won't want to miss that. So make sure you've got your notifications on to remind you when we drop our next episode. Between now and our next conversation, make sure you continue to check out the brilliant Suffolk Sound, providing you with all around the clock great live radio. And I shall see you on there on Thursday evenings and Friday afternoons. And until the next conversation, I'll see you soon.